Gabartli ga ga mani de gona ani lori chi gogus ga gene lori ka ga guchi go go guna tita go lori lori yo chombi charu go guna ta shita tene chashi sane meba nonje lo nonje pa yo tene chashi sane meba tene gati meba chawu kana ani chuyo ti cheta tangi grui cheta tangi chalu tena denge je ba kewa jingewa yer tita dember tomba dember tomba docha se do gacha to docha ye iki te tenye koi ane stawa yimi chalo je sombe lebar ko ta dojingo matare tadi katule yostoba yor muto nawato moto to doja me to rongini doja yen to gane chaba artist and to chaba gago res tiri soni to mungo lawo yor ane muto nawato pacho muto pinjato jato to choma gacha mare jar roshi ki chaba to gacha re ane meyena chahe yen chaba chi sabi yer rongini chaba tikare se 아니 그쪽에 잡아치긴 도매가 찍은 도와 요건 도와서 나가는 요 저렇게 좀 어떤데 나오요 그쪽 강가 봐 서울 막거네 봐 동바샤샤 되니 차동 매버 집으시고 차를 그러고 어떤데 단디노 넘버 노차 메시지 소요 어떻든지 키워도 거기 되니 잡아치 또 가를 뒤통그 잡아치고 말해서 대롱 수통께서도 통로는 오다 제바 넘버 3 제바 제본 맞고 나오지 오로지기 잡아안제나 잡아치는 도자치 때문에 등하치를 아니 코로 잠바도 그 지금 말해서 라고요 다디니 그 잡아도 가르해서 이 추토도 잡아도 그 kangen 뛰어오는 맛이 근데 등게 요르다 단단성서 좀 오로지기 잡아 이제 코로나나 지도도 맞지 가르해서 또 아니 고 신간으로 자도 아니 로제기야 키운 그 자도 아니 치도 로도 선호제 그 산이 키우고 아니가 빠주 동롱고도 거니까 자샹도 니가 콜로 찌바래와 니가 자때 로제기 잡아서 그 고자 저 집부터 맞아 더니 잡아면도 와 어떻게 서로 동근다 다들 가르를 잡아 가르를 기통 단대는 맞지야 적세버요 오야
Continue reading from page 48 in the middle. Nor can they be repudiated, for if they must be repudiated, it would have to be carried out by scriptural authority and by reasoning, in which case the scriptural authority and reason would themselves suffer the same fate. Meaning that the sense, these consciousnesses, if you repudiate or if you reject the existence of the consciousnesses and their respective objects, then you have to employ the reasonings of the scriptural source to reject that. And if we apply if you simply because that how that these consciousnesses and the respective objects, how you repute them. If you repeat them by saying that they do not exist inside, outside, and so forth, then even the reasonings and the scripture sources that you resort to repudiate the existence, even these, the means as the reasonings and the scripture sources, even they can be also repudiated, because even they, we will not find them to be inside or outside their paths. So it says that nor can they be repudiated, for if they must be repudiated, or if they are repudiated, it would have to be carried out by scriptural authority, and by reasoning in which scriptural authority and the reasoning, in which case the scriptural authority and reason would themselves suffer the same fate. Likewise, if they are repudiated, it would incur consequence of falling into the extreme of nihilism. Therefore, here it is the grasping at true existence of those objects that is to be abandoned or rejected, for it causes the sufferings and is the root of samsara. In other words, the distinction made here that these consciousnesses and the corresponding objects per se are not to be repudiated. Instead, for the reason that they do not create any suffering on us, they simply by having them or cognizing them do not have any consequence in the form of suffering. But when we view them as intrinsically real or as self-sustained nature, then the miseries ensue. The question arises as to on the basis of the distinction made here, that the eyes, ears, and so forth, they don't give rise to the afflictions. Instead, seeing them as intrinsically real, they trigger afflictions such as attachment, aversion, so forth. So the question is, how is it that they don't give rise to afflictions, and only viewing them as intrinsically real give rise to attachment? And some people, they argue, they come to ask that you stop viewing all conventional things like your eyes, nose, and so forth, your relatives, your near and dear ones, your enemies. Just stop thinking about all these things, and we will have just reject all of them in your mind, and then you can experience the acute peace. So we are rejecting them. Not only we reject the intrinsic existence of these things, we also reject all, and the peace is being experienced. So how come that these objects, they don't trigger the mental agitation? And in fact, the people, they do ask this question to me. In fact, I also encounter people who ask these questions, and what is said here is very clearly the distinction is being made between viewing these things per se, viewing these things as intrinsically real. Viewing these things per se doesn't really give rise to the afflictions. Okay, so how would you resolve this? That viewing these things per se does not give rise to afflictions, and viewing these things as intrinsically real gives rise to afflictions. How do you make this distinction? And so for me, what helps is that to seeing these things or viewing these things as self-sustaining entities. This really helps me to see that viewing these things as intrinsically as self-sustaining entities really gives rise to afflictions. And if you don't see things as self-sustaining entities, then the afflictions are not given rise to. This is really what helps me a lot. And people do ask these questions. For example, they give the example of in the farmland, in the agricultural land, we see that there are two kinds of vegetations coming up. One is the weeds, and the other one is the crops which we plant. And the animals, when they come to eat, they don't make the distinction. This is crop I like to eat, and this weed I'll not eat. No, they eat both. Likewise, the afflictions, they grab both the conventional things which we call as existing conventionally, and viewing things as the intrinsically real. So both these things equally trigger on the afflictions. They feed the afflictions. So how would you make this distinction? And for sure, we have to make this distinction. And in this text, which I studied here, very clearly indicated this distinctions here. And we have to explain how that viewing things as self-sustaining entities or intrinsic real gives rise to the afflictions and the emotions, and the viewing things as per se do not give rise to afflictions. This is, we really need to analyze.
Dona wami tawa nibalana pena cheje ane shita ronji ki chapa chati ti ronji ki mebar koguba le tita makuba shita sana yer tind mani pa nipa tsamla shita ronji mebi tind kuwa namna tawa mani temba maze tsuguto otistegi yore ona chabar shinda chabar to shita ane roji ki tana shita ti chano konde yo shita roji ki tana yo testo tandali chana digma chano konde yo ane kebala gons ti yala no ti yala no noli conjoint keba ti yo mare rishimendu shita te yona ngoto yo kombayo keba to mai hajo shita ronji ti yona yo go yo to kombayo to lawa te isa chena yo ti yo non tu re shandos tonya la keba ko non tu ane ta kar tendre shibar tendre shibi cheton ten nja sonshis on macho tenu ne norshindo ote te khadu tene sitar chiche ronje ki made gote mai kombate mai labade ote tada tene nortu ngane tene norshin so ale tanda ngaruchi chande yatana ti konan ni kebi rubi tani bit tola keber ruwe ane te yo ruwe te yo ane mate chare kosa no le sawa kuwa nungu ona shita ki roji ki indikate tete chaba ki roji ki mede tendre yimi chara tendre yimi la che amutu ba tendre to ani shi roji ki chaba ni pingo la che toto la che ba che ri ma tendre ile yi tendre kanere kuchele tele salte milte te cho chena cheta teo de ayo mayo cheba che gondo tini de tende yemi chaza tini pitu jane roje ki me bato tende ni ta roje ki me se to tende ni ta pitu jane yo pi tele pitu jane cheba che to la cheba go men ro tende me ba ta tene karalo tene pate chete ti so tende chena one
A reading from page 48, the last paragraph. And thus, the implication is quite clear. In short, arriving at an understanding of the view of the Madhyamika school must happen by way of finding the absence of inherent existence of, say, chariot, in the wake of searching for an inherent existent chariot on a chariot as a base. Not aware of this, someone may conventionally search for a chariot or the chariot in the fashion indicated above, and not finding it, assume that that was the meaning of the chariot being devoid of intrinsic existence. This is not a case of arriving at an understanding of the view, and it appears that is what is being communicated by the above citation. In particular, analyzing for the chariot either among its parts or outside outside and inside the parts thereof, with the assumption that if it was to exist inherently, it must be in a position to be established as such, is explained as a case of pushing for a nihilist concept of emptiness that overturns the norms of the conventionality. So there are two things where you find the chariot, and then you're not if not contented or not living there, still analyzing where the chariot is inside, outside, the parts, and so forth. This is not the ultimate analysis, number one. Number two, even if you were to say that, okay, not just the chariot, but the intrinsically existing chariot. Intrinsically existing chariot does not exist, and then if we employ how it does not exist, you employ the reason that this intrinsically existing chariot is not inside, outside, the parts, and so forth. This is also not correct. This is where we are going wrong. So if you do that, this is then the rejecting the conventional norms or the conventionality. It dismantles the conventionality. It denigrates the conventionalities. Okay, it continues reading. It was the fourth last line of the first paragraph. Besides, it would be a case of employing ultimate analysis upon the norms of conventionality. So, to posit the conventional things, you have to subject only the conventional analysis, not the ultimate analysis. If this is what you do, you are then projecting the ultimate analysis towards the conventionally existent phenomena, in which case you will dismantle or repudiate the conventional analysis. Besides, it would be a case of employing ultimate analysis upon the norms of conventionality, and thus not appropriate. This becomes clearly understandable from the above observations. And then, as for the syllogism that you put forth for establishing the emptiness of the chariot as the topic, it is empty of intrinsic reality because it is dependent originated. And the how it is dependent originated, whether it is dependent on the element of earth, water, fire, and so forth. So there, by taking an example for the syllogism, or for this reason, on this example, you have to correlate the dependent origination and the emptiness of intrinsicality, both on the example. If you don't do that just by seeing that this object is dependent on the earth, fire, water, and so forth, not too sure, or this doesn't seem like the proper analysis. It must be done to make it as ultimate analysis. It must be done in such a way that this dependent origination, correlating it with the emptiness of intrinsicality on the example, only then it becomes the ultimate analysis.
사이코 또 치코 또 롱비코 디발 테니 타바이 미쳐서 어떤이 타고 러시아에서 쟁저야 디니 커리노는 사고도 주지 용타바데 아니 데버트바 마이데 아니 디요 롱비 차신 디발 테니 타바이 미쳐서 디니 디 레치트가 같대 테레사 쟁저 요나니 존지노는 지요를 기타 탐지요 오모고모 오모 자완노는 다디 모이 다디 타죠 모먼제서 기타 롱지기 좀나 지그 커트 몸보요와노요 고사 몸부터와도 아니 존지 텔렌저야 안디노를 텔렌저야 저참 때문에 소소진도 된다 개발했나 오야 너시면 그만나 기바 기억이 거기 기비죠 용담 많이 해야 주의치기 야자는데 진짜 버티지 컨너리 견디 이제 요단에다 이 지소도 견디 루 거버너네 루시아도 가르르 루트 제원 루트 공부하다 말에 짐바다 말에 아니 올라도 개바도 또네 또와도 저도 르메 올로 총도 공부 르메 르마이 뜻이서 저 뜻이 제는도 와서 공부를 또 라바르지 제도 딱그 주르시 또 아니 가본도 와서는
Okay, from page 49, the last paragraph. Also, some may wonder, what if that is the case, then how should one understand the following lines in Arya Nagarjuna's precious garland of middle way? A person is not earth, not water, not fire, not wind, not space, not consciousness, and not all of them. What else is a person other than these? Just as a person does not exist absolutely because it is a conglomeration of the 6 elements. Likewise, each individual element does not exist absolutely because they are each a conglomeration. So here the question arises, if what we identified as after seeing the person, and then to analyze if this person is existing within the parts, outside the parts, or any of the parts to be identified as the person and so forth, if that is not the ultimate analysis, but this analysis is exactly done in Arya Nagarjuna's text and also in Bodhisattva Shantideva's text, then how do you reconcile with this question? And there are 2 ways to reflect on this. One is that with the syllogism, the person is the topic. It is it does not exist as truly real. It does not exist as intrinsic real, because it is a phenomena which is imputed on the basis of the element of earth, water, fire, air, space, and consciousness. So this is one way of. Then likewise, then the element of earth as the topic or the subject, it is empty of being truly real or empty of intrinsic reality, because it is also constituted of its own parts. So this is how we understand these lines on the basis of this syllogism, or otherwise what we find in Acharya Chandrakriti's text about that if the self were to be identified as the aggregates, then just as the aggregates numerous, the self should also become numerous. So this is it can also be explained in that context. Okay, continue reading from maybe page 50, the second last paragraph. Also, how should one understand the following lines from the 9th chapter of Bodhisattva Shantideva's way of the Bodhisattva? The body is neither the feet nor the calves, nor is the body the thighs or the hips, the body or the back is not a body, neither is the body the chest or the arms.
예소 송바 저때 예소 송바 근데 예소 송바도 고르고 치는도다 예소 송바 나기 또 어라 저때 중심나 대단한 지벌 muy dadi taju mombonje jibi dandra jibi tedo la ani teji no shi con zhongba no shi que no stala ya zhongce con zhongba ci zhongzhenba da各种经济那些都最容易产生的出现的老八个出现都说就得了，我呢容易产生那种，我呢吃起呢，现在容易的吃吧，我带的了对家路啊。最近那些corona呢，容易这把劲都，这容易这把就是没办法，最近才是的去盯着以后，容易的嘛，嘛这把我就容易的嘛这把了。过去的容易的这边去的嘛，就是容易这边，我买一把些个有人，蛮着，都这么去这那是，容易这边俺就有，那容易这边俺都，完了最多他的搞的有，那没人是。
Page 51 from the first line, and how about the following excerpts from Acharya Chandrakriti's Entering the Middle Way? How can a chariot be said to be intrinsically existent when sevenfold reasoning has discounted it? Finding nothing, yogis enter into ultimate reality with ease too. Thus, in this Prasanga system, existence is to be understood accordingly. To these queries, I want to bring attention to the context of Entering the Middle Way, where it says, because the multiplicity, the person too would be numerous, and to its corresponding commentary by Lama Tsongkhapa cited above. Likewise, Gyaltsab Je's exposition of the way of the Bodhisattva explains, if a joint is divided into its different parts, joint here, joints of the arms and the joints of your legs, divided into its different parts and examined, one won't find anything existing inherently. So there's a qualification of the word inherently. So we should be looking for the inherent existence of the things, not the things per se. Nor does it find anything existing inherently if those parts are in turn divided into the parts and examined accordingly. And the key here is that if something does exist intrinsically, then we have to examine whether it is the intrinsically one with its parts or intrinsically different from its parts. So the key is that the intrinsicality as a qualification must not be missed.